The bandage on Liora's arm had never meant healing. It meant survival. It meant another month of safety for her brother, Silas, hidden away from the prying eyes of the Bloodjaw recruiters. It meant Thorn wouldn't drag them both to the front lines of the border wars where humans were used as nothing more than biological shields. What Liora didn't know as she stood in the suffocating heat of the Solstice Gala with that stained linen cutting into her skin was that the man tracking her through the crowd wasn't just another predator looking for a night's conquest. She didn't know that his ancient magic had been dormant beneath his skin for 3 centuries, waiting for a catalyst. She didn't know that in approximately 4 minutes, the wall of lies she had built to protect Silas was about to be incinerated. The Solstice Gala was a rare moment of forced peace between the highborn and the feral. It was a glittering display of dominance where the elven wolves of the high peaks mingled with the savage packs of the lowlands. Liora had no business being here. She was a healer from the dirt streets, a girl who had caught the eye of a pack leader with a taste for breaking things he deemed beautiful. Thorn's hand tightened on her waist, his claws snagging the delicate embroidery of her tunic. She didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that flinching only fed his hunger. Smile, he hissed against her temple, the scent of stale ale and raw meat cloying on his breath. The Alpha King has descended from the Stonefang spires. If I can prove my loyalty by offering him a healer of your talent, he might finally grant me the mountain pass. Liora's eyes darted through the hall, searching for the legendary monarch she had only seen on minted coins. They said Tharion Stonefang was more runestone than man. They said he had carved his own kingdom out of the frozen north using ice and iron. They said he remained mateless because no woman's soul was strong enough to survive the sheer power of his bond. Liora had stopped believing in fairy tales the day the Bloodjaw pack burned her clinic and left her with a mountain of impossible debt. Thorn jerked his chin toward the center of the room where the air seemed to shimmer with a turquoise light. I am going to make my move. Stay in the light. Don't hide that arm. Make yourself look pathetic enough to pity, but skilled enough to use. Don't make me regret bringing you. If this story pulled you in for even a second, kindly support me with likes, comments and also subscribe. It means the world to me. He shoved her aside with a final, bruising grip that promised a long night if she failed him. Then he was gone, disappearing into the sea of velvet and fur. Liora let out a shaky breath, her forearm throbbing where the mark burned beneath the cloth. Her skin felt like it was on fire, a rhythmic pulsing that synchronized with the heavy footsteps of the man now approaching her from the shadows. The golden chandeliers of the great hall flickered like dying stars, casting long, predatory shadows against the marble floor. Liora kept her head bowed, her auburn braid resting heavily against her spine, a contrast to the vibrant green of the tunic Thorn had forced her to wear. Every breath was a struggle against the corset of fear tightening in her chest. Beneath the thick, crimson-stained bandage on her left forearm, her skin wasn't just itching, it was screaming. The mark, a jagged soul-rune she had kept buried under layers of medicated herbs and linen for years, was pulsing with a rhythmic, violent heat that she could no longer ignore. She could feel the eyes of the Bloodjaw wolves on her, their gazes lingering on the festering wound she displayed as her shame. To them, she was a broken thing, a healer who had failed herself, kept only by the grace of Thorn's twisted charity. Thorn's hand remained a permanent fixture on the small of her back, his thumb tracing the edge of her leather straps with a possessive arrogance. He leaned in, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her ribs. Look at them, Liora, he murmured, nodding toward the highborn guests. They see a girl with a rotting arm. I see a girl who is going to buy my seat at the king's table. Keep the wound visible. Let them see how much you need my protection. Liora bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. She thought of Silas, tucked away in the drafty cellar of their village home, believing his sister was merely attending a party to secure their winter rations. He didn't know she was being auctioned. He didn't know that the heat beneath her bandage was reaching a fever pitch, a white-hot agony that made her vision swim. The air in the room suddenly shifted, the scent of expensive wine and wet fur replaced by something sharp and electric, like mountain cedar after a lightning strike. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open, and the ambient noise of the gala died instantly. Liora felt the mark on her arm leap. It wasn't just pulsing anymore, it was clawing at the linen, desperate to be seen. Her knees buckled slightly, but Thorn's grip tightened, hauling her upright. "He's here," Thorn whispered, his voice thick with a mix of terror and greed. King Tharion Stonefang moved through the crowd not like a guest, but like a storm front. His silver hair caught the light of the enchanted candles, and the turquoise runes etched into his pale skin glowed with a faint, steady light. He didn't look at the lords bowing in his wake or the ladies offering practiced smiles. His golden eyes were fixed, with terrifying precision, on the girl in the green tunic standing in the shadows. Leora's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. As the king drew closer, the heat in her arm became a physical weight. She realized then, with a jolt of pure ice in her veins, that the bandage wasn't just hiding her mark from Thorn, it was trying to hide her from the only man in the world who could truly see her. Tharion Stonefang did not walk, he commanded the space around him, each step echoing with the weight of a glacier shifting. The air in the great hall grew thin, charged with a static tension that made the hair on Leora's neck stand on end. As he neared the center of the room, the turquoise runes etched into his skin began to pulse with a rhythmic intensity that matched the agonizing thrumming in Leora's arm. The court watched in hushed bewilderment. It was unheard of for the king's ancient magic to react so violently in a room full of commoners and lesser wolves. Liora tried to shrink further into Thorn's shadow, but the king's golden eyes remained locked on her with the focus of a predator scenting blood. Thorn, oblivious to the metaphysical tether snapping taut between his captive and the monarch, stepped forward with a grin that was more of a snarl. He shoved Liora slightly ahead of him, displaying her like a prize horse. "Your Majesty," Thorn rasped, bowing with a clumsy arrogance. "The Bloodjaw pack is honored. I have brought our finest healer to tend to the needs of the summit, though she is a bit damaged herself, she is quite skilled at obedience." Tharion didn't acknowledge Thorn's presence. He stopped a mere 3 feet from Liora, his sheer height casting her into total darkness. Up close, the scent of him was overwhelming, mountain air, ancient stone, and an underlying spark of ozone that made her pulse race. The turquoise light from his throat and collarbone flared brightly, illuminating the terror in Leora's glossy eyes. The nobles began to whisper, the sound like the rustle of dry leaves. They could see the king's runes reacting, casting flickering blue light across Leora's pale face. It was a display of raw, uncontrolled magic that defied every law of the court. The high priestess, Selene, took a cautious step forward, her brow furrowed in confusion as she looked from the king to the trembling human girl. Leora's arm felt as though it were being branded from the inside out. The bandage, thick and crusted with the fake blood she used to deter curiosity, began to smoke. A faint, ethereal glow started to seep through the layers of linen, a brilliant turquoise that mirrored the king's own light. She gripped her forearm, her knuckles white, trying to stifle a cry of pain. "Something is wrong," someone whispered from the crowd. "Why is his magic reaching for a human?" Tharion's expression remained a mask of stone, but his jaw tightened. He could hear it, a low, melodic hum that only he and the girl could perceive. It was the sound of a 300-year-old silence finally being broken. He reached out a gloved hand, his fingers hovering inches from her bandaged arm. The air between them sizzled. "You," he said, his voice a low, melodic growl that vibrated in Leora's very marrow. "What are you hiding beneath that filth?" Liora didn't wait for Thorn's permission to flee. As the court erupted into frantic murmurs, she ducked beneath the king's outstretched arm and bolted toward the arched glass doors that led to the palace gardens. The night air was biting, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the hall, but it offered no relief to the fire devouring her forearm. She stumbled past frozen fountains and manicured hedges, her breath coming in ragged gasps that clouded in the moonlight. She stopped at the edge of a stone balcony, clutching her arm to her chest. The scent of ozone was so thick now it tasted like metal on her tongue. "Running will not change what is written in your blood." The voice was like grinding stone. Liora spun around, her back hitting the cold balustrade. Tharion was there, having moved through the darkness with the silent lethality of a winter shadow. He didn't approach her with the clumsy aggression of Thorn, he simply existed in her space, his golden eyes glowing with an internal flame that made the turquoise runes on his face shimmer. "Your Majesty, please," Liora whispered, her voice trembling. "I am just a human. I have no place in your world." Tharion took a single, predatory step forward. The air between them crackled, a physical manifestation of the bond reaching out to bridge the gap. He ignored her plea, his gaze dropping to the blood-soaked linen on her arm. "You are a healer," he stated, the words more of an accusation than a fact. "I have smelled the herbs you use, valerian, moon thistle, and mountain root. You know the secrets of the flesh. You spend your days mending the broken bones of the Bloodjaw wolves." He moved closer, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The scent of cedar and ancient forest rolled off him in waves, calling to something deep inside her that she had spent a lifetime trying to silence. "Tell me, healer," Tharion growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate register. "If you are so skilled, why is it that you cannot heal your own arm? Why have you allowed this wound to fester for years? Why do I feel my own soul screaming in recognition of a rot that should have killed a human 10 times over?" Leora's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the golden thread, the soul bond, vibrating between them, urging her to reach out and touch the elven wolf king. It's a sickness of the blood," she lied, though her voice lacked conviction. Tharion reached out, his gloved hand catching her chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was unexpectedly warm, sending a jolt of lightning through her nerves. "You lie as poorly as you hide," he murmured, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "The scent coming from that bandage isn't decay. It is the smell of a storm waiting to break. You think you can hide from me behind a piece of stained cloth?" Liora felt the first tear slip down her cheek. "I have to hide. If they know, if Thorn knows." "Thorn is a scavenger," Tharion interrupted, his eyes flaring bright gold. "And I am a king who has waited 300 years for the air to taste like ozone. Show me what you have buried, Liora." Thorn's heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel, shattering the fragile silence of the garden. He burst through the hedge, his chest heaving with a mixture of panic and desperation. When he saw the Alpha King towering over Liora, his eyes went wide, but the greed flickering in his gaze quickly overrode his fear. He didn't see a fated bond, he saw a closing window for a deal. "Your Majesty!" Thorn called out, forcing a jagged, sycophantic smile. He rushed to Leora's side, grabbing her upper arm and pulling her away from Tharion's heat. "I apologize for the girl's theatrics. She's a flighty thing, prone to delusions when her wound acts up. I hope she hasn't bored you with her peasant babble." Tharion didn't move. His golden eyes tracked Thorn's hand on Leora's skin with a cold, terrifying stillness. The turquoise runes on his neck flared a warning shade of electric blue, but Thorn was too fixated on his own ambition to notice the predator's hackles rising. "I saw how you looked at her in the hall," Thorn continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial oily rasp. "You have a taste for the rare, and I'm a man who understands the value of a unique specimen. Liora is an acquisition I've spent years refining. She's a healer, yes, but she's also human, soft, easily broken, and entirely mine." Liora felt the air go cold as Thorn stepped closer to the king, his voice becoming a bartering whisper. "The Bloodjaw pack needs steel, Tharion. We need the Stonefang repeaters and mountain-forged blades to hold the southern border. Give me the shipment contract I asked for, and the girl is yours for the night. Do what you want with her. Break her, heal her, or use her to pass the time. I'll even throw in the boy, her brother, as a servant for your guard if the price is right." The silence that followed was deafening. Liora felt the blood drain from her face, her knees nearly giving way. To Thorn, she wasn't even a person, she was a currency, a piece of meat to be traded for iron. She looked at Tharion, praying for a sign of disgust, but the king was a statue of ice and shadow. Then, a sound vibrated through the garden, a low, tectonic growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. Tharion took a step forward, and the pressure of his aura hit Thorn like a physical blow, sending the pack leader stumbling back. "You speak of contracts," Tharion said, his voice a lethal velvet. The ozone in the air became a physical weight, making the hair on Liora's arms stand up. "You speak of owning what the universe has spent 3 centuries preparing for me." He looked at Thorn as if he were an insect beneath a boot. "You have 5 seconds to remove your filth from her sight before I decide that the Bloodjaw pack no longer needs a leader." Thorn's face contorted, the greed in his eyes curdling into a desperate, cornered rage. He didn't understand the primal shift in the air or the way the garden itself seemed to tremble under the weight of Tharion's presence. All he saw was his leverage slipping away. "She is mine by blood and debt." Thorn roared, his voice cracking as he lunged forward. He reached for Liora's auburn braid, his fingers hooked like talons, intending to drag her back into the shadows of his ownership. "You think a few glowing tricks make her yours? She's a broken human. She belongs in the dirt with the rest of her kind." Liora flinched, her eyes snapping shut as she braced for the impact of Thorn's violence, a sensation she had memorized over years of survival. But the blow never came. A sound like a thunderclap echoed through the gardens. Tharion moved with a speed that defied the physical world, his dark, ornate armor a blur of shadow and silver. One moment Thorn was reaching for her, the next, the pack leader was suspended in mid-air, Tharion's hand clamped around his throat with the effortless strength of a mountain crushing a stone. Thorn's legs kicked uselessly against the air, his face turning a sickly purple as Tharion's claws extended just enough to draw beads of dark blood. "You think you could hide from me?" Tharion's voice wasn't a shout, it was a low, terrifying vibration that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. He didn't look at Thorn. His golden eyes were fixed on Liora's bandaged arm. With his free hand, Tharion reached out. His touch was electric, a searing heat that made the golden thread between them sing with a violent, beautiful intensity. "This filth is finished," Tharion growled. He gripped the edge of the blood-stained linen and, with a single, decisive motion, tore the bandage away. The garden was instantly bathed in a blinding, ethereal light. The festering wound was gone. In its place, etched into Liora's pale skin, was a series of glowing turquoise runes that pulsed in perfect synchronicity with the king's own. The mark blazed with the power of a 300-year-old promise finally kept, the light spilling through the trees and back toward the great hall where the court stood frozen in shock. Tharion cast Thorn aside like a piece of refuse, letting him crumple into the gravel. He stepped toward Liora, his hand reaching back to pull her against his side in a gesture that was both a shield and a claim. "Look at her," Tharion commanded, his voice ringing out across the palace grounds. "She is not property. She is the queen your pathetic bloodlines will kneel to for the next 1,000 years." Liora stood trembling, the cool night air finally hitting the skin she had hidden for so long. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was the storm. The moment the bandage fell, the world as Liora knew it dissolved into a symphony of light and sensation. It wasn't just that the mark was visible, it was that the barrier between her soul and Tharion's had finally been incinerated. A golden thread, shimmering with the heat of 1,000 suns, snapped into place between them, anchoring her heart to his. The physical world blurred. The gasps of the terrified court and the whimpering of the fallen Thorn faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was Tharion. Through the bond, his 3 centuries of icy isolation rushed into her like a flood, and in return, her years of quiet, human resilience flowed back into him. It was a terrifying, beautiful symmetry. Liora gasped, her hand flying to her chest as she felt a sudden, sharp clarity. For 300 years, Tharion's elven wolf magic had been a wild, destructive storm, a power too vast for even a king to fully temper. He was ice and iron, a ruler who had forgotten the warmth of the sun because his own power was so cold. But as the bond settled, Liora realized the truth that had been hidden from the sages: his magic was a jagged puzzle, and her human soul, frail, warm, and brimming with empathy, was the missing piece that smoothed the edges. She looked up at him, her glossy eyes meeting his golden ones. The predatory rage that had defined him moments ago was receding, replaced by a profound, echoing stillness. He wasn't just her protector, he was finally whole. "I can feel you," she whispered, her voice trembling but no longer broken. "I can feel the weight of every winter you spent alone." Tharion leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. The turquoise runes on his skin began to soften, shifting from a violent electric blue to a gentle, steady glow. "And I can feel the strength it took for a human girl to carry a king's mark in a den of wolves," he murmured, his voice thick with a reverence she had never heard. The bond hummed, a low vibration in her marrow that told her she wasn't just a healer of flesh anymore. She was the anchor to a king's sanity. The fear that had defined her life, the need to hide, the need to shrink, evaporated in the heat of his recognition. She was human, yes, but she was the only creature in existence who could touch the heart of the North without freezing. As he pulled her closer, his dark armor clashing softly against her tunic, Liora realized that the bandage had been a shroud for her spirit. By tearing it away, Tharion hadn't just exposed her secret, he had given her permission to finally breathe. The golden thread wasn't a leash, it was a lifeline. The golden warmth of the bond was still settling in Liora's veins when the reality of her world came crashing back. She pulled slightly away from Tharion's chest, her eyes wide with a sudden, frantic terror. The mark on her arm flared a panicked orange. "Silas," she choked out, her fingers digging into the silver plating of Tharion's pauldrons. "Thorn has him. He's in the Bloodjaw barracks at the edge of the neutral zone. If Thorn's men see the light from the palace, if they think I've betrayed them, they'll kill him." Tharion didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for explanations or maps. He simply looked over Liora's head toward the shadows of the garden where a group of armored figures stood like statues of obsidian. "Kedrick," the king commanded, his voice slicing through the night with the precision of a blade. A tall warrior with twin blades strapped to his back and silver markings across his brow stepped forward, dropping to one knee. Behind him, 4 of the Stonefang elite materialized from the darkness. "The boy is in the Bloodjaw barracks," Tharion said, his golden eyes flashing with a ruthless light. "His name is Silas. Bring him to the palace. If anyone stands in your way, remind them why the mountain packs do not cross the Stonefang line. I want no Bloodjaw standing by the time the sun touches the spires." Kedrick gave a single, sharp nod. "By your will, Alpha King." Liora watched, breathless, as the warriors vanished. They didn't run, they moved with a supernatural fluidity, blurring into the tree line like a pack of hunting ghosts. She turned back to Tharion, her heart hammering. "They're just humans in that barracks, mostly. Scared boys like my brother. Please, tell them not to." "Kedrick knows the difference between a soldier and a victim," Tharion interrupted softly, his large hand coming up to cup her cheek, grounding her. "But he also knows that you are mine. And the world is about to learn that touching what belongs to the Stonefang carries a price no pack can afford to pay." Miles away, the Bloodjaw barracks were silent, save for the heavy breathing of exhausted conscripts. Silas sat in the corner of a damp cell, clutching a wooden carving Liora had given him. He heard the sound first, not a shout, but a low, vibrating hum of ancient magic. Then, the heavy iron doors were not just opened, they were torn from their hinges. A man in dark, ornate armor stepped through the dust. Kedrick didn't look like the monsters Thorn employed. He looked like a storm wrapped in steel. He knelt before the trembling boy, his glowing runes casting a soft turquoise light over the cell. "Silas?" Kedrick asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. The boy nodded, eyes wide. "Your sister sent us," the warrior said, extending a hand. "And the king is waiting. Let's go home." As Kedrick led the boy out, the remaining Bloodjaw guards who dared to draw steel were neutralized with a terrifying, silent efficiency. By the time the moon began its descent, the barracks were empty, and the first piece of Leora's old life had been reclaimed by the king's shadow. The transition from the blood-stained clinics of the borderlands to the obsidian halls of the Stonefang citadel was a blur of velvet and velvet-wrapped steel. Liora sat not beside the throne, but on one of equal height, carved from the same ancient mountain roots as Tharion's. Her auburn hair was no longer hidden under a fraying hood, it flowed over her shoulders, pinned back by a circlet of woven silver that mimicked the runes on her arm. But Liora had not come to the high court to be a decoration. The golden bond hummed between her and Tharion, a constant, steadying warmth that gave her the courage to speak when the alpha lords of the surrounding territories gathered to swear fealty. They looked at her with a mix of awe and lingering skepticism, a human woman holding the tether of the most powerful king in the world. The strength of a kingdom is not measured by the number of soldiers it can throw into a meat grinder, Leora's voice rang out, clear and unwavering, across the council chamber. She held her left arm high, the turquoise mark glowing with a soft, authoritative light. "For years, you have treated the human populations of the lowlands as resources to be spent. You have let sickness and poverty be your recruiters. That ends today." Beside her, Tharion leaned back, his golden eyes scanning the room like a hawk's. He didn't speak, he didn't have to. His presence was the iron fist that backed Leora's velvet words. When a minor lord from the Iron Pelt Pack rose to protest the loss of his conscription rights, Tharion's runes flared a dangerous, electric blue, silencing the man before a single word could leave his throat. Liora unrolled a heavy parchment, her healer's eyes scanning the list of decrees she had drafted. "We are establishing the sanctum of the Silver Root. Every pack territory will be required to host a neutral healing house, staffed by those trained in both elven magic and human medicine. No more debts for life-saving care. No more selling siblings to pay for a healer's visit. She thought of the years she had spent scavenging for moon thistle in the dark just to keep a neighbor's fever down, all while Bloodjaw watched from his high porch. She looked at the lords, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a seamstress or a victim. She felt like the architect of a new world. "I am a healer by trade and a queen by fate," she said, her gaze locking with Tharion's. He reached across the space between their thrones, his large hand covering hers. The golden thread between them vibrated with a shared purpose. "We will mend this kingdom's broken bones, or we will break the hands of those who keep it fractured." As the lords bowed their heads, one by one, Liora realized that her power didn't come from the crown. It came from the mark she had once tried to hide, a symbol that the smallest human heart could temper the greatest supernatural storm. The era of the Bloodjaw was over, the era of the healer queen had begun. The morning of the dual coronation dawned not with the herald of trumpets, but with a profound, shimmering silence that blanketed the Stonefang peaks. The air was crisp, tasting of the first snow and the electric ozone that had become the signature of the new reign. Liora stood before the high windows of the royal chambers, her auburn hair intricately braided with threads of pure silver. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, but its most striking feature was the open sleeve of her left arm. For the first time in her life, she felt no urge to reach for a bandage. The mark was there, its turquoise light soft and steady against her pale skin, no longer a secret to be guarded but a beacon to be followed. Tharion stepped into the light behind her, his dark ceremonial armor etched with runes that mirrored her own. He didn't speak, he simply rested his hands on her shoulders, the warmth of the golden thread singing between them. In his reflection, Liora saw the man who had waited 3 centuries for a partner, and in her own, she saw the woman who had stopped running. As they emerged onto the great balcony overlooking the Citadel's central plaza, the roar of the gathered thousands was deafening. Humans, elven wolves, and mountain shifters stood shoulder to shoulder, a sight that would have been a hallucination only months prior. Silas stood at the forefront of the royal gallery, his face bright and healthy, a far cry from the boy who had huddled in a damp cell. Beside him, Kedrick and the elite guard stood at attention, their spears catching the morning sun. The high priestess Selene stepped forward, holding a single crown of fused iron and moonstone. But as she moved to place it on Tharion's head, he raised a hand, stopping the ceremony. He turned to Liora, his golden eyes filled with an ancient, fierce devotion. He took the crown from Selene's hands and held it between them, the magic of their shared bond causing the metal to hum. 300 years I ruled as a winter storm, Tharion's voice echoed, amplified by the runes of the balcony. But a storm without a heart is merely destruction. Today, we do not crown a king and his consort. We crown the 2 halves of a single soul. Together, their hands guided the crown into place, resting it between them before Tharion placed a matching silver circlet upon Liora's brow. As their fingers brushed, a wave of turquoise light erupted from their joined hands, sweeping across the plaza like a physical blessing. The mark on Liora's arm flared with a brilliance that rivaled the sun, casting a glow that reached even the furthest corners of the lowlands. Liora looked out at her people, at the healers she would train and the children who would never know the sting of a Bloodjaw whip. She squeezed Tharion's hand, feeling the solid, unshakable weight of his love. The bandage was gone, the debt was paid, and for the first time in her life, Liora didn't just believe in survival. She believed in the light. Thank you for staying with me till this moment, and if you'd like to support me, kindly like, comment and subscribe to the channel as means a lot to me. Till next time. Bye.